I was 10, 11, 12, I don't remember, in line for the movies. And there were two guys in line in front of us, like 3 or 4 people in front of us holding hands. And my mother pulled me to her, not my siblings, just me, and looked at my father and said, "They're weird," which just made me look at those guys and I went, oh, now I get it. I'm weird like they're weird. And I looked at them and I thought, they look happy, they look like they're in love. I'll be fine.
Inform brings you incredible stories.
I left 2 days before the revolution. It killed me so hard.
James has never experienced the taste of fruits that haven't been attacked by pesticides, just like he's never experienced a neighborhood that hasn't been attacked by bullets. Some things just go hand in hand.
People say what's on their mind.
I think that it is a cardinal sin to lie to the American people about war.
Partisanship is a version of narcissism.
In downtown San Francisco, the Commonwealth Club's Inforum curates events that bring you face to face with the world's changemakers.
1/3 of the wage gains that women have made since the 1960s were made as a result of the birth control pill.
Twitter is a technology that I don't think we've seen before in this world.
Since 1903, the most innovative leaders have come to the Commonwealth Club to share their vision.
Sharing cars, sharing their homes, sharing. A shared dream, a shareable American dream. That could work.
You each can play a role in helping us chart a better future.
Housing and health and education and policy all live close to the surface in us when our children are murdered. It's all the same story.
We bring together the visionaries shaping the emerging trends in technology.
It was a combination of Instant and Telegram. It was the idea that you could take a moment in time and you could capture it and you could just send it out and broadcast it with the entire world.
I just threw this site together in about a week when I was at school.
Oh, great.
We've got angels, we've got incubators, we've got accelerators, we've got seed funds, we've got crowdfunding.
We eat, we drink.
One of our first dates ever, we pickled like 100 pounds of herring and made 300 pounds of sauerkraut.
Yay!
We never shy away.
75% of the people of this country want universal health care and expect it. And damn it, let's go.
Concentrated, deep, slow, loving, tender, passionate sex.
Whether you want to be on the cusp of current events or feast on pop culture.
I should have a great time writing. I should write a book that is as fun as any party I'd be skipping.
Inform events are fun and action-packed.
I have an anthropology scarf that does that twisty thing, so.
Come feed your mind and soul and celebrate the future with Inform.
I love San Francisco, and every time I come back here, I remember that this is the only city in America that has magic.
Hi everyone, I'm Crystal Contreras and I'm the director of Inforum. Welcome to today's program, U.S. Digital Response, Tech's Fight Against COVID. Joining us is a collective of tech experts who make up U.S. Digital Response, including Jennifer Palka, Raylene Young, and Raphael Lee. Moderating this conversation is data scientist and Commonwealth Club board member DJ Patil. The Commonwealth Club has suspended in-person events for the time being, but we are dedicated to keeping you informed during this pandemic. We're going full speed ahead with the full slate of live online programming. Most of these conversations are currently free to the public, so we do ask that you consider donating to the club to help us continue our work. You can visit us at commonwealthclub.org/online to learn more, and you can also text the word donate to 415-329-4231 during this live program. You can find this information and more in the description box below. Now, please join me in welcoming U.S. Digital Response to Inforum.
Thank you, Crystal. Hello, and welcome to today's virtual program with Inforum at the Commonwealth Club. I'm DJ Patil, Head of Technology at Devoted Health, Senior Fellow at the Belfer Center at the Harvard Kennedy School, and former U.S. Chief Data Scientist. I couldn't be more pleased and thrilled to talk to three amazing people today. Jennifer Palka, former Executive Director of Code for America, Raylene Young, former engineering executive at Facebook and Stripe, as well as a fellow at the Aspen Institute, And Raphael goes by Raph Lee, former engineering executive at Lob and Airbnb. Jennifer, Raph, and Raylene are founding team members of the U.S. Digital Response, a nonprofit organization that through a team of volunteers, technologists, provides pro bono services to governments and organizations dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Raylene also serves as the organization's CEO. If you'd like to ask them a question, please ask in the chat if you're watching on YouTube, or in the comments if you're watching on Facebook. And so maybe to get started, the place I want to kind of start this conversation with is almost rewinding the clock back and to where we were. And it's hard to remember, but it hasn't been that long since you all came together. March 16th, that was 133 days ago, or 19 weeks, or only 36.34% of 2020. It's not that long, but to put in perspective, what was COVID like at that time when back in March 16th? We had 4,500 people who had tested positive in the United States, and 88 had died, 6 of which were in California. The San Francisco Bay Area had moved to a shelter in place, and it was 3 days before Governor Newsom had issued the stay-at-home order for the whole entire state. Fauci had just warned that the worst is just ahead of us. That was his first time really warning that publicly. Today, we have 8,518 dead due to COVID just here in California. And a very sobering statistic is that we have 141,430 who have died in the US. And we currently have 57,091 who are hospitalized. And so, as we think about how much changed from the numbers back then to now, I want you to take us back to that initial moment and that realization of why jump into this, why create U.S. digital response when the numbers weren't as bad as people had thought. What got you to see this? And maybe Raylene, could you talk to us about how you came together?
Yeah, and I haven't actually heard the numbers from back then. It's really hard to kind of put my head almost back there and see how much has changed since then. So the U.S. Digital Response, I would say, was started off a somewhat simple idea and a bit of a prediction. It was founded by former U.S. Deputy Chief Technology Officers like Jen, who's here, and seasoned tech industry veterans, more like myself. And we kind of came together with this idea and thinking that with the pandemic, we were going to see government systems and government teams really be stretched beyond their current limits. And knowing all of the wonderful really talented tech expertise we have in this country, is there something there? We can connect the people who have this expertise with the government teams who are really going to need that help to scale beyond problems that we've really never seen. So I think what happened was that was a thesis, and we basically gave it a shot. We put a call out for help to technologists, and we reached out to people working in government that we knew through our networks. And we're basically like, is there something here? Can we provide help? I would say, as a team, we've really just been blown away by what we've been able to do on both sides. I think on one hand, we've seen those government services be taxed in a way that's really unprecedented, and in a way that goes way beyond where we may have initially thought around healthcare. We see systems being affected, like government services like voting, to accessing benefits and the social safety net in general. And I think we've been overwhelmed by the interest from technologists who raised their hands to help. So probably within our first few weeks, we had thousands of technologists all over the country raise their hands, sign up online just to say, hey, I'm here. Here are my skills. I want to help. And so I would say USDR has served as that bridge, that gap, to kind of bridge that gap between technologists who want to help and governments in need. And we've really seen that the model works. So we're just about past 4 months of existence, and we've had over 5,500 volunteers sign up to help from all over the country. We've actually taken on over 130 different projects with states and counties and city government teams in, at this point, 27 different states, which kind of is really amazing when I think about that. And as I said, it's all happened in just a matter of months.
It's I mean, it's just phenomenal. You know, Raf, why did you join? What got you to do this effort? You have like endless job opportunities with your background.
Yeah, I was one of the first volunteers with USDR. I'm the newbie on this panel. And it's because I was spending all my time and energy doom scrolling and reading the news and really just worrying about the future. And that didn't feel good. My background is in tech as an engineering executive. And, you know, like I have worked at a few different startups and they've all been amazing roller coasters. But the thought experiment that I run when I'm thinking about leaving a group or joining a group is if this group of people were to succeed beyond their wildest dreams, like what would the net impact on the world be? And in past companies, I've sometimes thought, like, I feel pretty neutral about this. Like, I love the people and the projects are interesting, but what is the net impact? And so I've been on kind of a quest for the past few years to find a way to make that kind of impact at scale. So like, I don't know, like back in March, in this time frame that you're talking about, there was a lot of energy from the tech community, especially here in San Francisco, like the Hacker News reading set, to try and find ways to help. And it seemed to me like a lot of the things that people were working on were a little bit like solutions in search of problems. Like the solutions that are going to move the needle aren't going to be like something crazy innovative. It's going to be mass cooperation and distribution and logistics and the kind of things that we invented government for, right? So a mutual friend told me about USDR, and when I read about it and heard about it, I was like, this is the way. We have to help governments. Let's help them be responsive to the need. And so I had like the immense privilege of having the time and the financial security to volunteer for free for a while, and the anxiety to not sit around doing nothing.
Great. Raylene, walk us through, like, how does an engagement work? Like, what is, like, you can't just show up to like government offices these days, even if you're wearing PPE and a mask. Like, what's that virtual knock look like, and what's the pitch of the U.S. digital response to help someone understand what technologists like you and Raf can offer?
Yeah, so something that I think is kind of really interesting about our team is it is basically this unique mix, almost I think 50-50, of really experienced kind of technologists and people who have worked in government. And so from day one, we've had a bit of this DNA where we have really been really deliberate about kind of meeting government partners where they are. And by having half the team of people who've worked in government, they kind of just know who to reach out to, how to approach that first conversation, and how to offer help. That said, I mean, everything we do is remotely. Something that's kind of fun about the USDR team is many of us have never met in person, but have spent maybe every day working together for 4 months and may not get a chance to meet in person for a while longer. So we do everything over calls. And something in that first call, the first thing we usually ask is just, how can we help? So, we have a government partner on the phone, on a Zoom call, and we say, what are you facing? Just tell us about the problems, and we're just going to figure out a way to give you help. I think in the beginning, there was a lot of skepticism, both kind of like, wait, these are just free volunteers. Like, what can you really do? And as time has passed, we figured out that there's a few different things. Like sometimes we can just be the sort of friendly voice in the room where we've actually worked with government partners to help them evaluate, vendors and existing technology they have. And in some cases, we've been able to build tools for them. And I think as we've taken on more projects and built things for one partner, we've also been able to show that to other teams. I think a big learning that we've had is a lot of the problems that we see are not unique to that one city or that state or that county. And maybe I'll even go so extreme as to say, I think nothing we see is unique to one place. Almost basically everything we see is probably applicable in another place. So now what we try to also do is when we get on that first call, we'll say, by the way, in case this is applicable to your team, here are like 10 other things we've seen from other government teams, and we're happy to help you in the same way. And that also helps people get kind of started with thinking about different ways that we can help.
Maybe we could just take a moment to kind of go around, and starting with you, Raylene, and then to Jen and to Raf. I'd love to kind of just hear about what has been a favorite project of yours that would give a sense of the breadth of type of projects that USDR works on. And How do we think about it?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite projects is almost hard to describe because it's not a single project. It's been actually more of a journey that I feel like I've been witnessing. So the context is like very early on in just the first few weeks that we existed, a friend of mine, her name's Reshma Kilnani, she just reached out, was very similar to Raf, was like, hey, can I do something here? Can I help? And we brought her on board and we said, hey, Reshma, there's this thing called unemployment insurance and pandemic unemployment assistance. And it's a big deal. A lot of people need help with unemployment and they need benefits. And she was like, great.
And this is all at the state level or the county level, federal? How should we think about it?
So this in particular was at the state level where it was coming out of the CARES Act. There was a big, CARES Act released millions, trillions of dollars in benefits. And there was new programs that were being supplemental unemployment insurance. But in addition, there are a lot of people losing their jobs who need to just access unemployment, even without CARES Act funds. So at the state level, she came in, knew nothing about any of this. And I feel like within weeks, and at this point, she's still working on it, it's been over 4 months, she quickly just became someone who you could watch, just learned everything she could about how these unemployment insurance systems worked. She worked with a team of volunteers. At this point, I think almost a dozen people are working with her on this. They ended up helping 6 different states in all different aspects, like helping improve their call center operations, bringing their websites back online. And I think I've just watched this kind of experience of learning by doing. And, at this point, that whole team is so passionate about unemployment and getting benefits to people in a way that I think most of them would maybe have never personally experienced in their own lives.
So if somebody is going to get unemployment insurance right now, or getting some benefits, they're actually interacting with the things that your teams have built.
Yeah, well, so in some states, I think I would say more that we have helped multiple states kind of improve their current systems. I guess I'll give one example that maybe is really kind of more illustrative. So one example is the user experience for applying for these benefits is really hard to understand. It can be slow, you can get stuck, you can kind of fall out and just maybe never complete your application. So what this team of volunteers did, the first thing they did was build a rapid kind of demo, like open source React application that just showed you what an easier to use application could look like. So this is an example where no states, actually launched that code or used that application, but we presented this, much better version application to multiple states. And in some cases, their own vendors or their own teams learned from our design and actually made their own applications easier to use. So that's kind of an example where it might not be us getting in the back and writing a bunch of code, but we'll kind of share either learnings or advice or best practices, or just build demos for them to use. And everything is open source and free to use.
Fantastic. Jen, maybe could you, there's kind of 2 parts of this I'd love for you to expand on. One is, the work that you have really led in the creation of Code for America and, helping people get food assistance and famously showed, how many steps it takes to do something very basic. It's exhausting. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And then also tell us a little bit about one of your favorite projects and how you kind of see this tying in of this journey arc of what it actually means to get people the help they need.
Yeah, it's, USDR is sort of the next step in this journey that's been happening for a while of bringing people from who maybe they're from the technology industry, maybe they haven't had the chance to have to apply for public benefits, into this world and getting them passionate about it. And Reshma, as Raylene was talking about, is just a great example, and Raf is a great example here. You don't know what it's like until you really do it. And the great thing about the skills of the tech industry is that user experience is king. And that is simply what you do if you're a good technologist, you're a good designer. You have to understand it from the ground up. No PowerPoint slide can help you, right? Like, you've got to go in there and do it. So it's been part of my journey to do things like trying to apply for SNAP benefits, which are, very similar to what Raylene's describing, where I don't even want to tell you about it. I just want everybody here who's listening to go try it. And it's better now than it used to be, but try doing it on a mobile phone. Assume you don't have a computer at home with broadband internet access, as many people who are needing to apply for benefits do, and go through all those 212 questions, not able to save your state, try to understand what they mean and feel that sense of anxiety that I think so many people in America feel when they're trying to interact with these government systems. You will feel it even if it's not real to you, and you'll start to get a small sense of what we're putting people through. So to have this talent come together and say, whether it's a Code for America or now many, many more people through U.S. Digital Service and saying, I can make this better, it's so meaningful. It's and I think it's just going to have a big impact. Some of these projects, like Raylene was talking about, are big, and they can affect all 50 states. Some of them are tiny. I mean, we had a first, like that first week before we had all our systems set up, we had people in like the New Jersey Office of Innovation, for instance, throwing us tiny tasks like, can you scrape the data out of this thing? Because I'm going to need to put it into, I need to use this in an application that we're building. And we sent it on to one of our volunteers who happened to be a former Code for America fellow and kind of knew how government worked. And I believe what he did is just stayed up all night. Like, we gave him the assignment on a Wednesday night and he delivered the thing on Thursday morning. And that then our friend in New Jersey, Ross Dakin, said, that's great. Here's the next task. I need a form put up for people to be able to use this. It's like basically a widget to understand if you were eligible for various assistance programs. And that same volunteer did that again now, like in a day and a half. And the desire to help when we're in a crisis like this will make you feel so much better about the anxiety that you're feeling about what's going on around in the world, and just seeing both the public servants and the volunteers responding with such speed, such skill, such passion. That's what this is all about for me, and it's a big deal here in USDR to have all of these people doing this.
It almost feels like you're a form of digital first responders.
Mm-hmm.
Does that resonate, Jen?
I think that with all things, when you start to do first response, you're there for the immediate need. And then all those underlying conditions that are creating that need start to seep into you. So, you can talk to Raf, you can talk to Raylene, you can talk to Reshma, you can talk to all of the people at USDR about the process of coming in to do first response and then wanting to get to the core problems and how can we solve these for the longer term.
Raf, when you got jumped in as a volunteer and you're thinking, hey, look, I've got these skills and I got this stuff, and you get dropped in and they're like, can you scrape this website? And you're like, hey, that's an interview question. Well, talk to us about what that first engagement was like and how you got your head around these kind of problems in trying to figure out how you could help.
It's funny. For the first month, I actually got sniped by the volunteers team at USDR to just volunteer other volunteers. And so it was like this weird Ponzi scheme, right? Where I had just joined this organization and they were like, go recruit into our weird cult. Sorry to put it that spicily, but it felt a little bit like that. And it turned out the experience of interviewing volunteers was really wonderful. Like, it was great. The kind of people who want to work at USDR and volunteer and help cities and states, they're amazing. They skew pretty experienced. They have the confidence that they can show up and deliver results pretty quickly. And like, someone used this term maybe the second week that I was there, that like USDR volunteers are people who run toward the fire, not away from it. And I was like, yes, that gives me life. Every time I get on the phone with one of these people or get in a Zoom call and have this interview with them, it's a person who like is making time out of their life and dropping their other interests and hobbies and things because they are trying to find a way to apply their skills to what governments need. So that actually was how I spent the first month. And it was a really amazing thing to do.
What makes for that ability, maybe the way to start this is, we often think of technologists and people as somewhat aloof and inability to engage. You think of government as this bureaucracy and people who are just unwilling to be flexible and these things. And I'm wondering what are the tricks, the methodologies, the sort of tactics that you use to really engage with people who are in a pandemic and a disaster literally happening around them. Raf, maybe could you keep carrying on the torch for us?
Yeah, you bet. Well, in terms of the civil servants that we work with, I am new to working with government entirely. I hadn't done it before. So I have learned a lot through this. And I had a lot of misconceptions about how stuff gets done in local government before I started to volunteer. The thing that makes today different from like every other time in US government history, well, maybe that's not true, but for now, like the main thing is that governments are under tremendous amounts of public pressure to deliver results. It's very visible. Their constituents are hurting. COVID-19 dominates the news cycle. And so like most of the engagements that USTR ends up doing come from governments who have found us or heard about us or saw a demo or something and want to see what we're about. So they're mostly inbound. And those stakeholders, I think, it's hard to generalize about government employees in general, but the stakeholders who come to USTR tend to have like a very strong idea of what their pain points are and what the problem is and who their constituents are. And they actually feel incredibly passionate about delivering services that serve that public need. So coming from tech, something that I find really refreshing is that they often come thinking about underserved communities, like first and foremost, right? And like in tech and startups, you don't really think about users who can't pay you. It doesn't serve the profit motive. But government doesn't do that. Governments are really good at this, especially now months later that we know that COVID-19 has a disproportionate impact on communities of color. It's really wonderful to talk to government partners who are thinking about them first and foremost and trying to find ways to make benefits more accessible and so on and so forth. So really common areas where we get asked for help include like benefit discovery and eligibility and food security, just making sure that people are able to eat every day, as well as homeless outreach. These are pretty common issues that tend to come across our desk. Mm-hmm. And I guess maybe like to elaborate for a minute on it, I had also heard that like government moves slow and procurement will be a nightmare and stuff like that. And I'm sure that like a lot of the time that's not true, right? But having seen enough projects come to us through intake and get scoped and then get delivered, I've seen firsthand how like strongly motivated civil servants, they can actually move really fast when they need to, and they are expert bureaucracy hackers inside of their own organizations. If there's something they need to manifest, they will clear the way and make it happen.
Raylene, how about to you?
Yeah, I think the thing I was thinking when you asked around, basically it's, you have the tech world, and you have this government world. And I think, as Raf said, we've found ourselves sitting in this really unique spot in the middle. And I think where we've had the most impact and just where you just kind of see the lights flashing on both sides is that the fact that we're meeting around getting concrete value and something delivered as quickly as possible. And so you kind of reduce everything down to the common denominator of what is the problem and what is the like fastest and most, best, cheapest, fastest solution that we can collectively build to get there. And I think every time we see that happen, both sides, like everyone involved just kind of, there's a new fire in their step. And like a couple things came to mind that, we were in a meeting once and one of the volunteers who does a lot of work with projects, he has worked in the government for a long time. He's worked at the vendor side, he's worked in government agencies, and he was just like, this work has helped even me rethink what's possible when it comes to working with government and technology. And part of that is just you can move really fast, but we're also just relying on a lot of things that are sort of tried and true in the startup playbook, like things like build a prototype first or a demo, and like the look and feel and the interactability of a demo is so powerful and it kind of grounds the conversation. Use off-the-shelf software tools. There's so many things out there that already work, and it's so much easier to customize something than to build something from scratch. Use open source, right? Part of what's special about our group is it's all volunteers. So every project is built entirely by volunteers, and as a result, by making it open source and using off-the-shelf software, you can actually swap in volunteers as they move on to other things in their lives and not interrupt that kind of the service or that project. So I feel like what we're trying to do is just apply a lot of things that are really tried and true in the industry, and they're coming at a right time, and they're feeling really like novel and critical. But part of that is just like we work towards each other to find the like minimum touch point that works. And something I'll also say, just kind of from my view of the tech industry, is, you know, with every day that passes, technology is only getting more powerful, cheaper, easier to use, and easier to scale. And so I think like we're at a time now where to build some of the systems that exist in government today, if we were building them from scratch with today's technology, we could definitely do it at a fraction of the cost, at a fraction of the time. And so what we're trying to do as a group is show a little bit of that path there. And even if there's a very large layer cake of 30-year-old software, we'll just figure out where in that layer cake can we kind of replace a topping here and there, and just try to make the whole system easier and more responsive as we go.
Raylene just said something really important I want to highlight, which is rethinking what's possible. And we're at a moment where so much of that is needed. We have neglected the machinery of government for many, many decades. And I don't just mean the technology. It's been widely reported that these unemployment systems that are supposed to cut checks for people who are out of work are written in COBOL. And that's true. And
can you say what COBOL is for those that
yeah, so I mean, COBOL is a very old programming language. People like to say it was written, in 1959. Is actually more like a 70s, 80s, 90s technology. But it's not flexible. It's not scalable. It's a perfectly fine thing. It's like, my grandfather's, old Buick is a perfectly fine car. I love it, but it was not designed to do what a modern electric car does. And
manage a pandemic.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're mixing metaphors here, TJ. But there's been this neglect that I think, the USDR community now, if you're, as Raylene says, about half of them are from the tech industry and have been just generally at the cutting edge of technology because they've had to build things that scaled hugely. I was talking with someone the other day about something like a 35-fold increase in need for unemployment in certain states. What startup scales 35x in a couple of months? And actually, if you think about it, lots of startups, if they hit that knee of that curve, they do have to scale that fast and that far. And that's exactly what Raylene was just saying. But it's very hard to make a COBOL system do that. So there's been this neglect, there's been this unwillingness to update the technology, but also this accretion of policy layers and regulation that make it very hard to even change the wording on a question to make it clearer, so that you don't have people calling in saying, I don't know how to answer this question. I'm afraid my application is going to get rejected because it's unclear what you mean here. And like that flexibility, that agility is really necessary. So there's just enormous layers where we need to rethink what's possible and show that something different is possible, from the tech to the policy to how tech and government work together. And if we don't take advantage of the crisis to rethink those things, excuse my language, but I think we're well, I'll say it nicely. I think we're in even hotter water after this pandemic if we don't use that opportunity. And that's what I really hope is happening as you have this cross pollination between these groups. It's not tech as the savior of government by any means. It's the possibility for this cross pollination to broadly rethink what's possible and increase our participation and our buy-in to it.
It's really fantastic. And please, any of you should always feel free to jump in. It's always weirder to do this virtually, but so please jump in whenever you feel you need to. One of the things I'm wondering about, Jen, you've also been on the cutting edge of this for more than a decade. I see all of you nodding your heads. Those that are on the radio can't always see this, but this idea that government's moving fast and we're seeing this changing paradigm. Jen, have you been surprised at this moment of time and the speed at which things are actually taking place? Because on we have this other narrative also, where we see that the numbers keep going up and services aren't being delivered to keep up at the speed and the pace at which COVID is harming communities.
When we started taking phone calls from government partners in that first week, I was hugely surprised because there were people saying, I need somebody to, do a data dashboard to help us understand the impact that's coming, and I need it tomorrow. And we gave them someone the next day and they used them that day. And that is not been my experience in working in government. It was the willingness to just I don't care, we're just going to get this done, lives are at stake, was, I shouldn't say surprising, it was appropriate, but I was just so proud of the response of public servants to the crisis, and so proud that we were able to help them that quickly. And the normal questions of, I need them to sign this thing, and do they have a security clearance? And a lot of that really kind of was not at the forefront, right? They were putting the need first and the compliance second, which is what you want to see. I am also surprised, though, at the number of places in which we are not willing to, and I say we in a broad sense, where governments also are not willing to throw out the rule book or the playbook, and it's holding them back. And there's still, I'm not speaking of any particular state here, but I know there are places where there's still a 10-day delay before contact tracing starts when you know of a positive test result. That's because we're still following what the rule books say instead of meeting the need. And I'm surprised that there are not more people saying, screw the rule book, let's meet the need.
Raylene, has the White House called?
No.
Why do you think that is the case? I mean, you have some of the best technologists, and I don't mean this as to make this a political statement. I actually genuinely mean it of we have a federal government who needs help everywhere. We have states, and maybe another way to ask it is those governments who are parts of the government that do not call, what prevents them from getting it?
Yeah, so I'm going to take this in a little bit of a different direction because of something I was thinking about. I would say, so for one, I think we do work with a bunch of government agencies at all levels. So one example is we talked to the team at U.S. Digital Service quite a bit, and they're at the federal level. And I think part of what, as Raf mentioned, a lot of what drove a lot of our projects were people coming to us for help. And we found that at the local level, especially cities, counties, and states, a lot of them don't have in-house digital service teams. And so we can kind of have sort of disproportionate impact quickly because we're really filling this gap that doesn't exist. And I think at the federal level and in some states that have their own in-house, digital service teams and have technologists in-house, they have a lot of things going on. And in some ways it's we can maybe be another voice in the room, which is helpful, but can sometimes be, another cook in the kitchen. So I think we're trying to go where we think we can be most useful. That said, I think what's so powerful about technology is that it can scale at all levels. And it's in the end, it's code, right? It's code, it's design, it's like learnings, it's techniques. There are things that are very portable. So with UI as an example of unemployment insurance, it's something that's happening at the state level, but there's also a federal Department of Labor, and they think about unemployment across the country. And so we can talk to these different groups at multiple levels. And also cities and counties may also care about how unemployment is administered because it affects all the residents. So we can end up playing a little bit of this bridge between the different places geographically, but also at different levels of government. And I'm really excited about that because I think we're happy to just be a partner and share information. The other thing I was going to say as I was listening is I do think, just to put my kind of tech hat on before all this, one of the things I've realized is just a really strong sense of empathy and kind of once you see the inside, you realize how hard it is. So, I do think there's a lot we can be doing at the macro level to make procurement a lot easier to kind of think about the burden of implementation of policy. But I also want to say that there are so many difficult constraints to work with in the systems that we have today. And even the most dedicated and tech savvy and really passionate civil servants run into these issues, and they're really hard. And I love the example Jen gave of imagine a startup scaling overnight. What's funny is I've talked to friends about this and said, hey, imagine if your software scaled 10,000% overnight. Would it hold up? And I actually think for a lot of people, it would not. It's don't take that for granted. It's not that easy. And I think if people who've worked at large software companies, the example I always give is think about the fail whale of early Twitter days. and just it was down. Like you just showed a cartoon and the site wouldn't work. And in some ways, like, not that I think we should expect more of government, like we shouldn't expect the fail whale of our benefits, but there's some empathy there that software is not easy. And it's even harder when you have these really core problems on the line, and it's not just, you know, loading your social media feed. So I think something that's really special about our volunteers too is they come in with so much humility. Like we come into the room and we say, hey, we're not here to sell you anything. Everything is free. We're just volunteers. And if you don't need our help, don't worry about it. We'll just like get off the phone and like not bother you. And I think that's also been really one of the best ways that we've actually been able to partner, is because we come in with that attitude.
How do you test for that, Raylene? Do you when you're interviewing people, do you test for that? Or because that is not the typical thing you hear of the stereotypical, frankly, the tech bro. So tell us more.
Yeah, well, actually, I want to ask Raf, because he was kind of joking about it. It's sort of true. We do have the Ponzi scheme of volunteers interviewing other volunteers. So yeah, what do you think, Raf?
Humility is definitely one of the most important things that we look for. The magic words, and I'll share them with you because we're all friends here, is, no job is too small for me. I will roll up my sleeves and do anything. And we hear that from a lot of people, even without like us, prompting them, right? They came to USDR because they just want to be helpful. I think that's one really big qualification that we tend to look for when we do our volunteer interviews. There's actually a small handful of things that we look for, and I can talk more about that too. Like the humility is absolutely important because it lets us, like, without that, we do become that tech bro, and we show up and kick in the door and we're like, we're the amazing tech people, like we will solve your problems for you. And it really dishonors the role of our partners, right? Who are the experts. They know their pain points and they know their constituencies, and they know the problem way better than we do. So we look for that for sure. We also look for like a bias toward action, by which I mean, when you're a technical person and you're not talking to another technical person, it's true even for two technical people talking to each other, right? Like it's easy to understand the problem wrong and build the wrong thing. And when you do that, you've wasted a bunch of time doing something that doesn't really work. So both the skill of like being able to talk about the big problem and see the seams in it that let you decompose it into little slices that you can ship independently, each of which gives you more information about what to do next, I think is incredibly important. And also, like, it sounds cliche, but it's incredibly true. Like, being a good communicator is really important, and especially being a good listener. I think, like, my favorite experience when I interview volunteers, which I still do these days, is when they begin to flip the interview script around on me a little bit and start asking the questions that they need to have answered to understand what USDR is about and how they might get involved and what's the time commitment, what does it take to be successful here, and still make it feel like a natural conversation. That is an incredible skill. And when I see that, I know that I can confidently go to a government partner and put this person in front of them.
It's almost like tryouts for the Justice League. It's like, do you have the right core kind of DNA to do these kind of roles? I'm curious, staying on this, Raf, it's very easy in technology these days to look for this, the easy solution that we all think is there. Like people keep talking about AI and machine learning and these type of things. I'm actually curious, like, what as people are looking for some of these very powerful things, and some of the things that we've seen, that were mentioned earlier, just got to stay up all night scraping websites. Give us some visibility into the tools and the technologies that actually really work, and the stuff that, like, what's it really like out there?
It's really boring, and I mean that in the best possible way. The tech that we use is not incredible AI. It's not GPT-3. It's not the newest thing that you have seen on Hacker News. They are composable technologies that you can glue together until you get the shape of the thing that you want.
Hey, I think Airtable is super exciting. So
Airtable powers a ridiculous number of like government projects that we've worked on with our partners. It's crazy. I think sometimes to people who don't work in tech, including many governments, it can feel like when you're trying to build or buy tech, it's like building or buying a bridge or a skyscraper. Like, there's no value until you get the whole thing, right? It's this huge monolith, and it tends to be very expensive. But the reason that startups are able to move so quickly is because they have like a big box of Legos, and they know how to snap them together, and they have a roll of duct tape. And so, like, in practice, what startups do and what we do when we are beginning a project with one of our partners is to look for the open source tools and look for the APIs, SaaS services that are cheap and that let us just kind of like glue together the basic components that we need until it kind of looks like the thing that we need, right? And that can only take a few days. That could take up to a week. And then when we put it in front of our partners, they have something to react to and to critique and to click around with and say, this is amazing, or I don't like this, or what does this button do? I don't know, I'll press it anyway. But rapid prototyping really, it really kind of like inverts this misconception that, especially I think in government, that technology takes months or years to ship when it can really just take days or weeks.
Yeah, I think one other thing, kind of a good analogy, is like, so yes, I think it's boring, but I'll actually, no, I don't think it's boring. I should clarify. I think the analogy is more like, it's kind of like theoretical studies versus like applied studies. And so I don't think applied sciences are less interesting, right? It's just different. And I think what's really, really neat about kind of everything we do is you think the end user is like very much at the forefront of your mind, right? So you're coming in, you have your toolbox of off-the-shelf software, open source, whatever it is. And by the way, if AI were the right tool, we would use it. It's more about what is actually the right tool for the job. And one example I love to give is in the issue, thinking about food security and feeding people. I think it's so important right now. And we happened to work with one county in Texas where they were working with a local produce distributor who had food to give away, and or to sell at low cost. And their problem was, we have all this food, we have it in boxes, we want to get it out to people. The problem is, how do people find out about where this food is, and how do they sign up for these food boxes? And that doesn't seem like it's not a cutting edge technology problem, but it is very much a technology problem, and an interesting one. There's the design considerations, there's kind of like the different users that have to log in, the supplier, the family that needs money. And our team, basically a team of volunteers, built a tool for that in a few weeks. And within weeks, we had it launched in DC. We had a similar tool launched in Tulsa. And in DC in particular, within one day of launching that tool, 1,400 families signed up for food. And I think for that team, I haven't asked them for a quote or anything, but I would guess that even though they were using off-the-shelf software and React components and open source and using Stripe for payments and kind of all of the things that exist, and they weren't using any AI, they weren't using anything, cutting edge. I think the satisfaction of getting that service online and seeing that you were feeding 1,400 families in one day, like that kind of applied impact is so powerful. And I think for me, that actually feels novel and new, like every day, because I actually feel like you don't necessarily see that impact sometimes working within big companies. If you are working on an AI engine, for example, it's very abstract sometimes who's actually experiencing the impact of that algorithmic change, right? It's many, many steps removed. And here it's like tool, launch, people, get fed or get money, get benefits.
We have some great questions coming in, and for those that want to get a question in, we'll try to answer as many of these as possible. Please put them in the comments or the question section in your respective place you're viewing this program. This comes from James on YouTube. How do you maintain focus, motivation when you work so hard, but then see politicians and citizens ignoring the science and guidance, like wearing masks, or worse, fight against it? How do you take that on? Raylene, would you like to take a shot at that?
Yeah, I think part of it is, so I do think it's tough to read the news at times. And I think something that we all experience is, especially I would say in the first few months, just every day it felt like the guidance was changing or something was happening, and the resurgence and all of that. So there is a lot happening in the world, and it's tough, and a lot of it isn't great. But I think what kind of brings us back to the work is the fact that when we talk to our partners and the people they're serving, these are real people that need help. And we see the problems in front of us, that if we can just work hard at them and solve them, you can actually see the impact right away, and we know that it's being helpful to people. So I think in the end, that's what's driving our work, is like we know it's channeled directly into like impact for people. That said, I also think our work is trying to contribute to this broader narrative and push for better technology in government that Jen articulated so well earlier. It's, I think of all of our things are contributions into showing that, hey, yes, you can build a more incremental, like agile, like scalable benefit system, and that these things are possible. So I think we have double motivation, both the kind of immediate results, but also the feeling that we are trying to contribute to something that I think can hopefully change the field and help government teams see something different. That's rethink what's possible.
How about you, Raf? You're talking to these volunteers and they're kind of doing the sprint. How do they get back up in the morning when they see a headlines, frankly, discounting a pandemic or not buying into that this is a real issue?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I feel like it doesn't, I think we all reckon with this in our own ways, but first and foremost, every volunteer at USTR is working on something that is helping with the problem. And it's very satisfying to, I think without being able to help, you feel helpless. You feel like the world is happening to you and you can't do very much about it. I find that being at USTR, and it's a common experience with many of the people who I work with and who I interview, that they came because like their way of coping is to volunteer. Their way of coping is to help out. Their way of coping is to contribute their skills to something that they know for a fact, if it ships, is going to help people at scale, which is exactly what government does. I also uninstalled my social media apps, so I had to cut myself off doom scrolling the hard way. But maybe another thing, and this isn't directly USTR related, is that like 80% of Americans are in favor of national mask mandates. And I think like when you get away from the doom scrolling and the news cycles, you see that there are a lot of helpers in this country and a lot of people who are trying to make the right thing happen, not only for themselves, but also for the people around them. And I think our partners who work in government like exemplify that in one way, and our volunteers exemplify that in a totally different way.
Jen, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the ethical implications of technology building for only one population versus the broad base that government is responsible to serve, especially those that are underserved in different forms. We just celebrated the 30th anniversary of the American Disabilities Act and still don't have great enforcement of that. We have those that are under siege because of their immigration status or perceived status on immigration. How do you think about that when you're building tech, and how do you make sure that we're really building for everyone?
I think one of the things I'm proudest of that in general, I think tech has been able to really just synergize with government on. And I've just seen this happen so many times, and I think the language is there now to have both sides really understand each other, is that I think tech has built simple interfaces that work, and they've gotten good at that in the consumer tech world. And then they've been able to bring that into government and say, wait, when we build to meet government needs that's focused on compliance, we end up with these big overscoped things. But if we build actually for the most marginalized first, if we have to make it simple and easy to use, because perhaps somebody has a disability, perhaps somebody doesn't have, they have a limited phone. There's all these different ways in which a simple, clear interface works for someone who's marginalized better. There's many different ways this is true. Then we build to work, it works for everybody. So we have to start there. And I think as much as we want to talk about how there's these wide gulf between tech and government, this is a great example of where there's actually a common set of values, a common approach, and now I think a common commitment much more broadly to doing it this way.
Lynn has Lynn on YouTube has a question, which is in similar time. It's like, how does government be harnessed beyond? How can what you've built be really harnessed post the pandemic? And Tara also on YouTube asked a similar question, which is, How do we make sure that we continue to help local and state governments optimize their services in normal times, especially those that are strapped for resources and money? Fran and Lynn, as I mentioned, also have similar questions. How do we think about the eventual one day that when we get past this, but budgets are crushed and still we're continuing to take this momentum and the energy that you've really built and continue to power that? Raylene?
I think one thing we've learned, it's only 4 months in, but I think we've learned that this pandemic and the impact of the crisis is something that I think is going to last for a really long time. And I actually mean that not just specifically on healthcare, but also there are so many things that I see us helping transition through a one-way door. So one example I'll give is in New Jersey, we were helping them look at their SNAP benefits, so food access benefits. And previously, you would have required an in-person interview and a wet signature or a paper that you had to mail in. And I think that's an example where in this time, you can't do that anymore. So we have to go digital and we have to be able to submit an online form or an online application. And so that's something that we help them kind of transition over. And I look at that and I think, any government team or any process that's going digital like that, there's no reason to go back the other way, right? So I think this has kind of made us all rethink how we work and how do we kind of interact in the digital world and a lot of these are one-way doors, I think, for the good, kind of good changes. So I think that's part of it. I think the other one is the idea that, again, technology is only getting cheaper and easier to scale. And I think if we use this as an opportunity to transition old systems into new ones, I think a lot of these kind of larger systems, big and small, are going to be on a new kind of platform, and future changes will be easier and cheaper. And so that's something I think we try to impress upon the systems that we work with is, I think right now we're at a point where it seems impossible, but yes, you can have faster, cheaper, and better technical solutions at the same time. And so I think my hope is that, we can kind of use this moment to actually usher in kind of new technology that is just going to scale and work better. I think the other thing that I would say is very difficult, but I think in some ways this crisis has really shined a light on a lot of populations that were not well served by technology or by accessibility to services in the physical world. And now I think it's going to usher in, I think, really interesting ways to interact online that I hope are going to be more accessible to everyone. So I'm optimistic. I think there's actually a lot of invention that needs to happen. And I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what these new interaction paradigms are and different ways that you can interact with government services online that didn't previously exist.
Raf, how about from your perspective as you work with all these volunteers and they go in, are they changed? Are they thinking of a career change? Are you thinking about a career change in these through this experience?
It's not uncommon for that to happen, actually. I think I came to this project with a very pessimistic view that government technology would never change. Kind of like how I feel about climate change when I feel at my most pessimistic too, right? This problem is too big. What can we do about it? And the experience of being on the ground, working on projects, working with my project leads and with the engineers and designers and content strategists who actually get things done, our shared experience is that it actually is not very hard to make incremental differences. You can go from, I joined and I don't know what's happening, to I shipped something for a major city that has impacted 10,000 people in the span of a month. And that's really transformational. I think that's really special. It's that, and it's also, frankly, the exposure to people like Jen and the other co-founders and yourself and the people who have really paved the way ahead of us, right, in the GovTech world. There would be no USDR if there was no healthcare.gov intervention or ATNF or USDS or all these local innovation and technology offices that are popping up in different cities around the US. USDR is not this crazy anomaly that is completely unique. It exists in this ecosystem where tons of different individuals are bringing something to the table in the hope of making not incredibly fast change sometimes, but gradual and persistent and lasting changes to these legacy systems that when you make them better, they are better for a really, really long time. We've actually had several volunteers who wrapped it up at USDR because you got to get paid at some point. and who went and joined USDS and 18F. And people have gone and joined the Biden campaign and other like areas in the policy and political worlds. I think it's not uncommon at all to have this experience and have your mind be completely changed about how the world works.
If I might just add for the viewers, United States Digital Service and 18F, two really great groups at the federal government that are doing this kind of work in a very sustainable, long-term way. But if I may also add, there would probably also be no USDR without our own interviewer here, DJ, who was a model for all of us, and his response working with the state of California and inspiring the rest of us to get involved. So thank you, DJ.
Thank you. As we just have a little bit of limited time left, I want to return back to the 141,430 that have died due to COVID. And, it's an undercount, and it's just a tough thing to think about the names behind those data points. But I also want to recognize what a powerful beacon of light and hope that what you've created is. And so maybe to kind of carry us out for a little bit, give us a glimmer of what gets you up in the morning and challenges and drives you to keep working on this. What's a glimmer of hope for you as you look forward? Raph, why don't we start with you?
It's a big question, and I think you have to go looking for it. It's just a weird time. My glimmer of hope is that I think that crisis creates change. Like, sometimes you have to feel the pain of a broken system before you get enough motivation and like collective desire to fix it. It's certainly true in startups, right? Where like until your website goes down for 12 hours, you don't build your SRE team to keep it up all the time. Until something makes you nervous about your security situation, it's hard to like really find the willpower to convene a security team. And I think that's true like throughout history as well, right? Like the New Deal back in the 30s, the United Nations were both responses to world crises. This is happening recently too. Like in 2 weeks in June, public opinion on Black Lives Matter increased like as much in those 2 weeks as it had in the preceding 2 years put together. It just reached its inflection point. So I guess like the glimmer of hope I'm looking for is that this crisis sucks. Like the problem that is creating all this urgency is not a good problem, but the urgency itself can be a catalyst that can really transform society. And it's because of it that we're beginning to talk about better healthcare systems that serve everybody and a refresh to our unemployment insurance system and how we will be more prepared for the next pandemic, hopefully.
Raylene, what's your glimmer of hope?
I think a lot about what technology means in today's society, and I am an optimist. Actually, I would say that. So I think of a lot of the different layers here. I think of one thing that we talk about all the time is that a lot of tech problems are not perceived to be technology problems, and they're not fundamentally technology problems, but they can be helped by technology. So that's something that I just think about a lot. Is that when you think of technology, it doesn't have to be the AI engine that automatically answers your phone. It could be the tool on someone's computer that helps you triage and, sort and respond to phone calls faster. So I think there's something here that's happening with people just seeing technology in a different way, and the fact that it's so much more accessible to people across the country and really across the world. So that gives me a lot of hope. I also think, I think there's going to be a lot of invention that will happen in technology too. I don't think we're done innovating. And I think constraints also breed creativity. So I think we're just starting to see it with some interesting interaction models online. But I think that we'll come out of this with a better understanding of how to use technology in all parts of our lives, but hopefully also some new ways that we can use it, maybe even just for entertainment or ways to kind of increase community and connection.
Jen?
What Raph said really resonates with me. I think back to something that occurred to me back in 2016, which was the status quo isn't worth protecting. It's been bad. It's been real bad. And maybe our eyes haven't been open to it. And when I say it's been bad, like my world that expresses itself as like, yeah, nobody was talking about the fact that our unemployment systems they didn't meet the need then. They didn't meet the need before we had this crisis, and nobody was doing anything about it. Not despite the clear, awareness of it. And it's a crazy thing to say that something that's just truly awful is what's spurring hope. And I hope I'm not rephrasing your thing in some sort of crazy way, Raf, but like, it is not until your eyes are really open to how poorly our society works for so many people, whether it's benefits or inequality or lack of jobs, that you can start to fix those problems. And I have to believe that this is the beginning of building back better.
It reminds me of a quote, Jenna, you and I have been able to work with, Secretary Carter, who's Secretary of Defense, and says, security is like air. You only need it when you don't have it. And it feels like we're in one of those moments where we realize we don't have the air and the oxygen that we should for all the population. As our time wraps up, it is an Inforum tradition to ask all of our speakers the following question. What is your 60-second idea to change the world? It would be great to hear each of yours. Jen, why don't you kick us off?
I have a very specific one that I've been thinking a lot about, and it's that I'd like to give the Minneapolis Police Department, or the city of Minneapolis, a fantastic design and software team that could help them build the new systems that will power the reinvention of public safety and public services, and of course, social services.
Hear, hear. Raf, what's your 60-second idea?
Oh man, I thought about this for a long time. It has always seemed crazy to me that the way that we talk is for me to have an idea and then turn it into words, and then I'd say the words and then you listen to them and then you have an idea, and I have no idea whether or not like they're anything like each other. So I would like for us to develop some kind of like perfect telepathy, right? That like gives you the ability to truly understand what someone else is saying. We don't have that yet. So I think the next best thing is probably if we just taught everyone, kids in kindergarten, how to do reflective listening, which I think is the secret weapon, and like just creates empathetic exchanges where, if you say something that's a little bit confusing to me, I'll say, let me replay that back to you just to make sure I understand. And I'll say it and you'll be like, no, this is what I meant instead. And over time you kind of converge to the right thing, right? What if everyone could do that? I think our society would be completely different.
Fantastic. Raylene?
Yeah, such a hard question. Okay, so I don't know how this would actually be implemented, but it's a very idealistic, optimistic view. I actually think a lot about climate change as I was actually thinking a lot about working on problems in that space when all of this happened, and it hasn't gone away, kind of just thinking about the world and our impact on it. So the idea that I would love to get out there is just, can we as a society think of a way to live that's not extractively with the planet and with each other? I think that over time, just society and our industries, our energy industries, our food industries, everything has become very extractive. It's one way. It just sort of assumes a bit of a zero sum where we pull things out of the earth or from each other. And I think there's probably some way to live more sustainably and more circularly. So that's something I think a lot about.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fantastic. Each of you, I want to thank you, Raylene Young, Jennifer Palka, Raf Lee, for joining us today at the Inforum at the Commonwealth Club. Y'all are heroes in my mind. Thank you for everything you've done. Thank you for bringing teams together to help our communities. Thank you for just everything you've done. It's incredible. If you work in public service and your government team seeks assistance with adapting to the pandemic, you can request help at usdigitalresponse.org. If you'd like to watch more virtual programs or support the Commonwealth Club's efforts in making virtual programming, please visit thecommonwealthclub.org/online. I'm DJ Patil. Thank you and stay safe.
Hi, I'm Dan Ashley, the evening news anchor for ABC 7 News in San Francisco, and I hope you and your loved ones are staying safe, healthy, and comfortable during these very challenging times. I am also a proud board member of the Commonwealth Club, one of our most important Bay Area institutions. The club has been hosting wonderful events with exciting speakers and topics in the Bay Area for over a century. In times of crisis, good information and strong connections in our community are especially important. And during the current COVID-19 crisis, the club has really stepped up. Since March 6th, the club has brought you over 100 live-streamed events with speakers and panelists, including past governors, secretaries of state, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, mayors, county supervisors, respected medical experts, the president of the University of California, experts on anxiety and happiness in times of stress, and many, many more. Every program includes a live chat, so you and viewers all over the Bay Area and beyond have been able to ask these experts the questions that are on your minds. Every program has been neutral and unbiased in true Commonwealth Club style to get to the bottom of the issues that are so drastically affecting our lives. The club has done all this public service despite being profoundly affected by the crisis. The inability to hold events for the past 2 months has forced the club to cut its budget and staffing by 50%. The remaining staff are working from home to bring the community these valuable and informative live-streamed programs. The club needs your support to continue its shelter-at-home programming. Please make a tax-deductible donation to the club now by texting the word DONATE to 329-4231. That is, donate to 329-4231, or visit the Commonwealth Club website, commonwealthclub.org. We need the club to be here in the months and years ahead to help inform and educate as we figure out how to get our society and our economy safely moving again, consider changes to the way we live, and work as a result of this crisis, and take steps to prevent a future pandemic. Once again, please support the Commonwealth Club now by texting the word DONATE to 329-4231. That is, donate to 329-4231, or visit the website commonwealthclub.org. I want to personally thank you for supporting one of our community's truly great organizations. I'll see you on ABC 7 News and at the Commonwealth Club. Stay safe.